What's up guys, I'm Phoenix Master 1 and welcome back for some more Fire Emblem Heroes. In this video, I'm going to be giving you guys the review of this mythic banner that we're getting this month and also a review and builds for Mila. And Mila was definitely a unit that was on everyone's mind when it came to being a mythic unit because Duma was already a mythic unit. So it was just a matter of time when she could be a mythic unit, and she is a light mythic hero, which is pretty interesting because she is not trying to compete with her brother in the Astra season. Mila is a colorless infantry dragon and she gives you defense buff in the light season, which I would say that it isn't really as good as speed, which Peony gives, or resistance, which air gives. Resistance is definitely really nice for a lot of tanks, and a lot of people actually wanted her to be an Astra unit, but it's probably for the better that she's not an Astra mythic because Thrasier is there in the Astra season as a Anima mythic unit, and she can just absolutely dunk on dragons. Not only that, she can provide defense buff to the Anima teams, so that could have made her Slotty skill triggering a bit harder, but we already have like 2 melee mythic units in Astra season. What we really need there is actually some kind of range, really good mobility unit who can provide nice utility. So I'm pretty happy that she's a light mythic unit. She comes with Nurturing Breath, which is an exclusive weapon for her. It gives her +3 defense, which is really good with her slot skill. And she also has the adaptive damage, which is pretty common on any kind of Dragon Breath. And the secondary effect of her weapon is to provide support. So she can grant +2 to all of the stats of the allies within 7 rows and 7 columns centered on unit during the combat. So it's basically the entire map is what they're trying to say. So this kind of support is really good because of its massive range. But keep in mind that Bramimond is a dark mythic unit and his Slotty skill just ignores these kinds of invisible buffs. But still, Bramimond is just one unit that this effect is not going to be active for. All of the other enemies that are going to be facing, this kind of support is really good. And just by existing alongside Mila, you can get these stats, which is really great. She's got Rally Defense Res Plus, Bracing Stance 3, which is incredibly good skill for a lot of tanks. It does have the guard effect built into it and gives you +6 defense and resistance during the combat in the enemy phase. She has got Sabotage Attack, which is really good with her high resistance. And by the way, the stats you see on the side of the screen are actually confirmed stats. If you pause the screen when they're showing the trailer, you could easily see her stats, and I've just put her stats in this way so that it appears to be good visually for you guys along with all of the skills. So we already know her stat spread, and Sabotage Attack is definitely really nice for support, and attack debuff in general is a thing which universally any kind of unit can utilize. Tanks can utilize by taking less damage, offensive units can utilize that by triggering stuff like Heavy Blade and all of those things. And most of the times the enemies are pretty close to each other in ether raids, and her Slotty skill is an exclusive skill, Mila's Turn Wheel. So at start of turn, she inflicts isolation status on foes in the cardinal direction who have got less defense than her through their next action. So she just needs to have 1 more defense than the foe in the cardinal direction to inflict isolation effect on them. And isolation effect is really good because it disables the assist skill of these foes. So stuff like dance is just gonna get disabled, which is really great because it makes the match simpler for you, as because having dancers as your enemies can definitely make things a bit unpredictable at times. I mean, you can still read the AI, but still it does make things a bit more complex, but isolation effect just gets rid of that. And isolation not only works on dance, it also works on restore plus traps on healers, rally traps, Legendary Crom's assist skill, and Legendary Lucina's future vision. But the thing is that after they get dance, they can just get rid of the isolation effect. So that's why inflicting isolation status on dancers is definitely the best thing ever, and it can be really helpful at times. So this kind of effect is definitely really good for support. And the other effect from this skill is that if she's deployed in ether raids during the light season, then she increases the turn limit in ether raids from 7 to 8, which is really good, I guess, for having extra times. There are definitely some times where you could get maybe pots or 1 extra pot if you had an extra turn. So this could be pretty nice, but it's not really too necessary, I would say. Just a nice bonus, I guess. And most of the time in ether raids, matches are decided within the 1 turn where you bait out the enemies. That's basically the most important turn. But if you're using someone with low mobility, then having an extra turn can definitely be pretty nice to get to the ether pots. And I'm not really too sure if this is going to be stacking up with multiple Milas, because the description doesn't explicitly state that. So if you use 2 Milas, will you have 9 turns in ether raids? If you use 3 Milas, are you gonna have 10 turns? I'm not really too sure, we'll have to see, but one extra turn is more than enough, I would say. So the most important thing that she has got going for her is her Larcei skill, because she can have defense-based isolation, which is really great because dancers usually stack up their HP to avoid isolation effect from Bridal Fiorm, and defense stacking on these kinds of dancers is really hard unless you have got like highly merged Berkut or Xander or something like that. And the best thing is that in the Dark Season, we don't have a mythic unit that can give defense to their allies. In the Anima season, we've got Thruseer who provides defense, and this is really good for Mila because there's no defense increasing Dark Mythic hero as a counterpart to her. As a unit, she's a really good support unit for hit and run teams, which are already so good in the light season because of Peony, and she's overall a really great option in the light season. But you know, Air and Peony are present as free light mythic units, and Air gives you resistance, which is much better for tanks, and she can also be utilized in Gale Force teams, which are known as Air Force, where you just run Disarm Trap and Fury on air, and within 2 combats she can fall into the Wings of Mercy range. Then whole Gale Force gang just teleports and finishes off the opponent's team. So there, Mila definitely doesn't help, and Air can also run Temari plus Dagger to provide those debuffs. So that's definitely something which Air has got, and Peony is absolutely irreplaceable because every team loves the utility of a dancer, and Peony is just so damn good that it's really hard to like replace her with someone else, because she can just like give you so much movement option. So a lot of times it is basically going to be a choice between using Air or Mila. It depends on your team composition. Like Mila doesn't eat up a slot like Bridal Fiorm because she's a mythic unit herself, and she can use assist skills like Smite and Reposition, which Bridal Fiorm cannot. And as someone who uses a lot of Bridal Fiorm with hit and run strategies, that is a really good thing because I really miss like having any kind of assist skill on Bridal Fiorm. And Bridal Fiorm also has a lot of trouble isolating HP stacking dancers like Sylvia, Ninian, Nils, all of those dancers, and the meta definitely shifted towards those dancers because Bridal Fiorm just got so common that a lot of the higher tier Aetherite teams started to utilize stuff like Nils, Ninian, and of course Sylvia. So Mila can isolate those dancers, which Bridal Fiorm cannot. So Bridal Fiorm's utility is absolutely dead in the light season, I would say. She's just much better to be used in Astro season. And Mila is just very useful as a support unit. Now, what does this mean? Does this mean that dancers are dead in Aetherites? Absolutely not. Because people just run multiple dancers. They do run 2 dancers, and Mila is basically going to be forcing a meta where people are going to be running multiple dancers, like 2 or 3 dancers. And I think that this increases a bit of value of dancers like Hoshiden Summer Micaiah, who can provide the dance utility but can also function as a really great nuke because she has got Hardy Bearing built into her weapon and she's pretty powerful. So even if her dance is disabled, she can still act as a nuke with something like Wings of Mercy. So that's just my opinion. Overall, a pretty good support unit with min-max stat line, and I would say that if you run hit and run teams or if you have issues with dancers, then Mila is definitely worth pulling for because it can make your matches easy and you wouldn't have to read the AI that much. And we can always have 5 teams in Aetherite, so she can be like a side grade to Air for certain matchups. But as I said, for tanks and a lot of teams, Air and Peony are still gonna be the bread and butter. But having Mila's isolation effect is still really handy, and it's just much appreciated. So she's not really going to be useful for increasing lift, I guess, because everyone just has free Peony and Air. So in that sense, it doesn't really help you get more lift, but it's just a pretty nice handy option to have. And as we're on the topic of scoring, she's actually really good in Mjolnir Strike scoring. Along with Peony, Air doesn't really score all that well, but Mila is a 172 BST Infantry Dragon, so she can be really useful in that game mode for scoring, specifically in the light major seasons. So you're still going to be facing multiple dancers. You can only isolate one of them. But if you run a good hit and run team, then you could snipe one dancer, isolate the other dancer, and just go from there. And like I really enjoy hit and run strategy, so I'm definitely going to be pulling for Mila and I think she's really great for that specific strategy. And in general, she's pretty great for facing teams that are annoying on their own, but are much more annoying when they're backed up by a dancer. So Mila can just, you know, stop that, and like defense-based isolation is really, really great. As for fodder, she's got Bracing Stance 3, which is extremely good for any kind of tank, as I said, and you can also inherit Rally Defense Res at the same time, and Sabotage Attack. It depends on which skill you want to go for. Sabotage Attack is already present on Neor Anna and also Selkie, who was present in the normal summoning pool, so pretty decent as a fodder as well compared to someone like Naga. I'm just hoping that we can also get a really, really great Astra Mythic unit in the upcoming months. I'm also quickly gonna cover some of the Mila builds so you can get an idea how you want to build her. She already does have a pretty good base kit, but still there are a couple of options that she could explore. The first build is a budget build with Defense Res Sacred Seal. Stuff like Fortress Defense or Fortress Resistance can also be run on her Sacred Seal slot, and this is just an example what you could do with a completely budget build without changing too much from her base kit. And Bonfire, Glimmer, Ignis, you know, all of those specials are pretty good options for her, but I would suggest you to have lower cooldown specials in general for ether raids. But Bonfire, because she's so slow, that could be triggered. And the second build is a budget bulk stacking build. So Fury is actually pretty great for her because it can increase her resistance for sabotage and defense for, you know, her isolation effect. And you could definitely run Fortress Defense and Sacred Seal, but I feel like that's definitely an overkill. It's not really easy for dancers to get 47 defense to stop Mila's isolation effect. So I feel like having more resistance for the consistent sabotage effect is probably a better thing to do. And because she can use stuff like Smite and Reposition, and because she's a really great support unit, you could just use her as a Smite support by having a Link skill in the slot B, which are available in Grail Pool. So like these all builds are pretty budget builds. And now we move on to slightly expensive builds. So you could of course run Fortress Defense Res, and that's definitely the most premium option to increase her bulk. And that can allow her to trigger her isolation effect really consistently and also consistently, you know, trigger her sabotage attack. But the thing is that increasing her bulk that much is definitely going to be attracting a lot of debuffs from stuff like Dark Shrine, Chill Defense, and Chill Resistance. Now, it's really good that she can actually soak chills, but the thing is that you could make an argument that soaking those kinds of -7 debuffs might hamper her ability to isolate. But I would say that still, after all of that, even if she has got any kind of defense debuff, she's still gonna be able to trigger her isolation effect quite consistently on majority of the dancers. So this is definitely an option that you could run. And the second build, just please listen to me before you bully me in the comments and take this build out of context. Lightning Breath is unironically a pretty good option for her because she can actually increase her HP even more and use something like Even Pulse Tie. So not only she can disable dance on the opponent's team, she can also help you against infantry pulse teams with Even Pulse Tie. And having another turn in ether raids can just help your ability to stall out and get rid of the, you know, specials which your opponent has got ready. So this is definitely an option that is possible, I guess, so that you can support your team in multiple ways depending on what you need. And then I've got the build with Distant Counter and Null Counter Disrupt. So Mila is very min-maxed and she does have a really good bulk. So you could basically use her as a check to staff units and Cav line. Cav line is a pretty common archetype of defense teams, and Cav line doesn't really use any kind of dancer, mainly for the isolation effect. So they're not going to be having any kind of dancers, but Mila is not going to be a dead weight because she can still take care of some of the healers and definitely some of the units with her high bulk. And Null Counter Disrupt is definitely going to be like enabling you to take out these kinds of healers because she does have the bulk to take them on. And this can definitely be done as a way to not only support your team but also take on some of the annoying units which your team might not like. And now we move on to the plus 10 builds. So these builds are for the whales or for the people who really like Mila and are going to be plus 10 merging her. So she does have an incredible bulk and you could basically use her as a tank herself, but the problem is that you cannot increase her HP because she cannot take the effect of blessings from other units, which is definitely a big bummer, but still she's a decent tank for what it's worth. She can get really high mixed bulk and she can utilize Distant Counter Special Spiral with Soul for retaliation, with Soul every time one special spiral is ready. And once again, Lightning Breath, as I said, unironically, it's a good option because it increases her bulk by giving her plus 5 HP and increases her visible resistance, which can improve her matchup against AoE specials, which do take your visible resistance into account. And Bracing Stance, she already comes with that. She could run lull attack resistance to just ignore those buffs. And then we've got the ultimate tank build with Distant Defense 4, Null Counter Disrupt, and Quick Riposte. So all of these builds are possible if Mila is going to be used in a bonus season, because she's going to be having stat spread similar to a plus in Mila when she's a bonus, so she could definitely be used as a tank, and she actually gets HP when she's a bonus unit, so definitely worth exploring if you do want to build her like this and you just want to use her as a tank because of her stat spread. Now let's take a look at some of the other units that are present on this banner. Legendary Ephraim is definitely one of the better Lance Cavaliers we have got in the game. Flame Segment is really good, giving him the double, and that's his biggest strength, that he doesn't really depend on his speed to get doubles. Flame Segment is really useful for that, and his primary role is basically as a Gale Force unit, thanks to the auto double that he could get from his weapon. So you could have Heavy Blade on Slaughter and have Cook on Pulse Sacred Seal, and that could give him 4-turn Gale Force, which he could trigger even by attacking any kind of range unit. However, the thing is that Legendary Ephraim faces a lot of competition from units like Percival and Sirius, who can fulfill the same role of being a Gale Force unit, and they can get really powerful. When it comes to free-to-play, Lance Cavaliers, Perry and Oscar are also a really good mention. All of these Cavaliers do have -1 special cooldown from their weapon, so Gale Force becomes a 4-turn cooldown special without even using Quick on Pulse, so they can be really good Gale Force units as well. Unfortunately, he's not really all that good for scoring purpose because of his cavalry BST, and as for fodder, he has got absolutely nothing. So if you already have him pulled and you have got him with decent merges, then pulling him again is gonna be a big bummer because he gives you no value as a fodder, unfortunately. Legendary Hector is still one of the better Axe Armor units, but there are just so many Axe Armor units and he faces a very tough competition from them. Mamori just outclasses him completely because she has got a weapon similar to Thunder Armats and can get even more defensive with that. Still, Thunder Armats is good on its own because it can stop the follow-up attacks, but still he has got lowish resistance, so not the best for tanking a lot of mages compared to someone like Mamori, who does have better resistance than him, but you would definitely need to invest quite a bit into Mamori with stuff like Distant Counter if you want to have the same usage as Legendary Hector. And Ostia's Pulse, his preferred skill, is really great for special cooldown reduction on cavalry and flying units, and this can be used really well on mixed teams. So unlike Infantry Pulse, cavalry units and flying units can also get the special cooldown reduction with this skill. So that gives him a pretty unique support ability, and you could definitely make a mixed team around him, and it can be really fun. So as I said, he does have low resistance, he's got armor weakness and low movement. So that's going to be a big issue, but that can be applied to a lot of old armor units in general. Even though he's like an old legendary unit, unlike Brave Lucina, Brave Ephraim, stuff like that, he still scores decently in Arena because of his BST. As for fodder, he has got Distant Counter and Vengeful Fighter, which is really good as he could inherit that at the same time. Legendary Lucina is still a pretty decent unit because Future Vision is a great skill that can be used in Aether Raid's defense to make it harder for your opponent, and in general Future Vision does help you with movement, and it does have really great synergy with Link skill, which is really nice, and Link skills are available on Grail units. She's definitely one of the better colored archers, but her father, Legendary Chrom, absolutely crushes her in the competition. Legendary Chrom is also a blue infantry archer, and he's just so much more busted than Lucina, it's not even funny. So he has got the same color, and he can be an offensive and defensive threat at the same time because of how bulky he can get and how hard he can hit. So even though he's not really all that fast, a Legendary Chrom to face is definitely going to be much more scarier than facing a Legendary Lucina at this point in the game. So it's definitely pretty sad how her father gives her a tough time in this class type. And she doesn't really score high in Arena. It's the same problem with all of the old Legendary heroes. She has got pretty low BST. So even if you get merges on her, she's not really going to be helping you as much as the newer wind like Legendary units like Legendary Eliwood, who will score much higher. As for fodder, she has got absolutely nothing. So Sparrow 2 is present on Naysala, Wings of Mercy is on Kayn, and Distant Guard is on Kronia. So she's really underwhelming as a fodder, which goes same with Legendary Ephraim. Both of them don't really provide you with any kind of fodder value. Another busted archer is present on this banner, and his name is Legendary Alm, the King. He's absolutely busted as well, just like Legendary Leif. But the reason why he's busted is that he can shred through defense like a knife cuts through butter. And he has insanely high speed, and he can make productive use of that speed stat with a special Lunar Flash, which does scale off based off his speed. And it's a very powerful low cooldown special. So Legendary Alm basically just slays all of these high defense units, and he's a very annoying unit to face because of his high damage output and the fact that he's so fast. And the only counter to Legendary Alm is basically HP stacking or having a Raven Tome with Triangle Adept. But HP stacking can be pretty hard at times for many units. And as for fodder, he has got Darting Blow 4, which is probably one of the worst tier 4 skills. It's not really all that good, but still, it's a tier 4 skill nonetheless. Could be useful for scoring, or could be useful if you're running some kind of specific fast build. And he does have Null Follow-Up, which is the better skill, I would say. So you could actually inherit Darting Blow 4 and Null Follow-Up at the same time. And Null Follow-Up in general is so good when we have got so many units in this game that can just get auto doubles based off their weapons or skills when they actually don't have the high speed to do that. So that kind of skill is super useful for fodder. The Legendary Eliwood is one of the best support units in the game because he can give you bonus doubler to the highest attack ally on the team, and bonus doubler is pretty insane and it can stack up with bonus doubler slotted skill on that unit. And he also has Vision of Arcadia, which is really useful as a support skill if you do have a beast or a dragon unit on your team. And in Ether raids, it's not really hard to have like Naga on your team. And outside of that, we do have free Ninian as a dancer, and we do have units like Raisin, Naysala, and Pain who have been given out for free, so not really the hardest to make use of. However, the problem with this kind of support is that it is affected by Panic, and Panic is everywhere, in skills, in Panic Manor, in Ether raids, and recently, Panic Manor can be upgraded to level 7, so it's really hard for you to avoid Panic from a well-placed Panic Manor. And even outside of that, stuff like Panic Ploy, Panic Smoke is present, so that's the downfall of this kind of support. Someone like Male Corin or Brave Lucina do provide you with that support, but they don't really care about Panic. But Eliwood support is definitely affected by Panic. As a unit himself, he's not the most stellar, but still he can hit decently hard, and he does have a decent attack stat. Also has his attack super boon, I believe. And he's super useful in arena scoring in the win season, so he can be really useful in Allegiance battle. And overall, like, if you just use a very strong unit with high attack, just pair him up with Eliwood, and like they'll have bonus doubler. Just spam them with a lot of stats, and that could help you beat like majority of the in-game content. So excellent support unit. You can inherit Rally Speed Res and Death Blow 4 at the same time if you fodder off someone like Tail 2 who has got the normal version of this rally skill. And of course, Death Blow 3 is present on Klein, but that's all he has got for fodder. Death Blow 4 is present on a couple of different units, but I wouldn't really recommend you to fodder him off because merging him is going to be helping you if you care about scoring in the Colosseum modes. Legendary Julia is an incredible nuke mage. She's very powerful and can be very defensive on the resistance side of things. Light and Dark is such a great skill. It's a spectrum lull skill essentially, and can also disable the adaptive damage of the dragons, so she can actually take on dragons pretty easily with her high resistance. Having this kind of spectrum lull skill is really good because visible buffs are super common and she will just ignore all of that, so that is great. However, she does face issues when it comes to doubling consistently. And other top tier blue mages like Ophelia, Brunia, and Duo Alphonse don't really need to care about doubling that much. In case of Brunia and Ophelia, they can get faster than Julia. And Duo Alphonse doesn't really need to double because he hits hard enough, and his weapon can just disable any kind of enemy's double. So Julia does face that problem, but nonetheless, she's a very good unit. Mirror Impact is a really great skill to be used on many units. It does give you +10 resistance and +6 attack. Impact skills in general are pretty good. Legendary Leif is absolutely busted, one of the best units in the game in general. He's a busted hit and run unit even on his own without any kind of dancer because of Neuron Zeal. And when you pair him up with a dancer, then there's a lot of fun to be had. Close counter advantage is also a thing which you could run on him because his weapon is a mixed phase Brave weapon, and it also has an impact skill if it's used by player in the player phase. Overall, he's an incredible unit. He has got good mobility being a cavalier, and he also has Neuron Zeal, which is a super unique thing because range units cannot really have Gale Force, and Neuron Zeal is basically that. As for fodder, he doesn't have anything other than attack res push, and attack res push is a bit of a niche skill compared to attack speed push, I would say. Attack speed push can be run on any kind of offensive unit, but same cannot be said for attack res push, but still it does activate in both phases, so it's definitely a pretty useful tier 4 skill. Osian is definitely one of the better axe units that we have got because he has got a conditional distant counter weapon that's really easy to trigger. He just needs to be above half health, and it also gives him -1 special cooldown, which is incredibly good. His stat spread is also good, but the main competition that he faces as a tank is with Brave Ike. And Brave Ike is an absolute monster with that Irvan's weapon Refine, which has got damage reduction, and there's just no competition between Brave Ike's tanking capabilities and Osian's tanking capabilities. Now obviously Osian does have a workable speed stat, so you could make him into a close call repel tank, but at the end of the day, Brave Ike is way more accessible, and like he's gonna be appearing in the weekly banners as well, so getting merges on Brave Ike is way easier, and in general his tanking capability is much better than Osian's, I would say. Still, nonetheless, Osian is a pretty good tank unit as an axe infantry. His fodder is also pretty good. He has got Mare Stance 3, and these tier 4 stance skills do have the guard effect built into it, so this is really good for a lot of ranged tanks who want to get extra resistance, attack, and also stop the special acceleration of their foes. Larcei is an insane sword infantry unit. Her weapon is absolutely amazing because it gives her -1 special cooldown, and that makes Ragnalastra into a 1-turn special. And if she's got more speed than the foe, or if the foe is at full HP, then she gets +4 to all of her stats, and also gets lull attack defense basically, where she's able to ignore their visible buffs to attack and defense, and that is a super useful. And with Repel, she's deceptively bulky. I'm sure you have faced Larcei in Hall of Forms and those kinds of in-game modes like Tempest Trial, and she's a really annoying unit to face. But still, she faces a decent amount of competition from really fast other sword units like Marita, Violet's, Shannon, and I guess now Fallen Ike as well. All of them are really good units, and Larcei does have her niche where she can ignore the buffs to attack and defense of her foes if she's got more speed or if they're at full HP. She also has a preferred special, Ragnalastra, which is really good with her high speed and makes productive use of her high speed. And as for fodder, Larcei is a top tier fodder unit. Repel, I value these kinds of damage reduction skills pretty high. So having Repel or Close Call is extremely good with a fast tank and can make them so much more tankier and gives them better matchup against AoE specials. She also has Panic Smoke, which you could fodder her off for, and also attack speed solo, so fantastic fodder unit overall. Leif is an Anima Mythic unit, and he gives you speed when you use him in Ether 8's defense, and speed is, I wouldn't say it's as good compared to the defense which Thracier gives, which can be super useful, and the attack which Duma gives, and he doesn't really have utility of Duma with his Upheaval, which can just destroy any kind of structure and also give you chip damage, or Thracier's Killing Intent, which is a super big threat for a lot of units, and Thracier with Killing Intent can at times even kill Altina despite the Weapons Triangle disadvantage. But at least he's not squishy, he does have a decent bulk, and he can fit right into the Infantry Pulse teams that he could use with Thracier as well. And the damage which he does from his weapon, his preferred weapon, which can do 20 damage, can actually be pretty useful to set up for many skills like Wings of Mercy, Escape Route, Desperation, Vantage, and so many of these other things. So it is definitely useful, but still I wouldn't say that he's really all that good of a mythic unit. I've personally been using him for months now, and I just use him in my Ether 8's defense team. I have to use him because he does have that inherent value of reducing the lift loss, and I only have one Thracier, but still having like double Thracier is probably the best case scenario, and for some teams having Duma and Thracier is going to be helpful because Duma can break these structures, which is really good, and he does give you the attack. But if you don't really like Duma because of his mobility, then Leif is definitely a pretty decent option. So as I said, he's not really the best defensive mythic unit, but still a competent defense team can be built around him, and at the end of the day, he does help you reduce the lift loss from Ether 8's defense. Outside of Ether 8's, Leif is really good unit to be used in in-game content. His base kit is more than enough to carry you for that, and he can be also really useful in Mjolnir Strike for scoring, because he already comes with Distant Counter, has a preferred slot B skill, and has a high scoring special right off the bat. So he can be really nice for that game mode. I personally just used Leif with Vodao and Glacies because he does have really good burst damage output with that. And Leif in general does have a really good attack stat, so that could be used productively. And that's really how I used Leif and have been doing that for months now. As for fodder, Leif does give you Distant Counter and Time Pulse at the same time. However, Time Pulse is only locked to infantry units. So if you do fodder off Distant Counter to any other movement type, then you will not be able to inherit Time Pulse. But nonetheless, it's really good that you can inherit both of these skills at the same time. Annette is definitely one of the best axe units that we have got in the game, because Crusher has got adaptive damage and lets her give extra movement to an ally with the use of a rally skill. So that's incredibly good for Aetherite's defense, and in general, that's a really good support skill. And she herself is very powerful. She packs a punch. She's got 39 base attack, and adaptive damage with Crusher makes her a pretty powerful unit. And overall, she's got a really balanced stat spread, so she's kind of versatile with her builds. And as for fodder, she's got defense res ruse and also rally attack speed. So if you got Bradle Cordelia from the limited Divine Codes thingy, then you could inherit both of these skills at the same time. And since Mila can isolate stuff like Legendary Alm pretty easily, if you want some extra movement shenanigans, then you could run Annette in your Aetherite's defense team. Now Mila can isolate Annette pretty easily as well, but the opponent will have to make a choice between isolating your Annette or your Dancer. So that's the choice you can force them to make, and in general she's pretty good and nasty in Aetherite's defense. And now time for the final verdict of this banner. So this banner is absolutely stacked when it comes to colorless. Mila sharing colors with Legendary Alm and Legendary Leif, which are one of the best units in the game in general, and that's much better rather than having sharing colors with someone like Female Grima in future, where people mainly do not really want to pull female Grimas. And Bramimond is also someone Mila could share colors with in future, so that could give you the full value of the light and the dark season. But still, this isn't really all that bad, because getting merges on Alm and Leif isn't really going to be hurting that much, because they are high scoring units in Arena and just busted units on their own. And red is also a really stacked color. Legendary Eliwood Leif do provide you with decent fodder. They are good units, and Larcei is also pretty insane unit and does have the repel fodder. Blue, in my opinion, is probably the worst color on this banner, just because of the fact that outside of Mirror Impact on Julia, they have absolutely nothing for fodder. So definitely the weakest color, I would say. As for if you want to pull for Mila or not, it really depends on how you're doing in Aetherite's light season. If you're doing comfortably and you feel like you don't really need the isolation from Mila, then yeah, you don't really need to pull. But if you have issues with dancers and if you run hit and run teams, then she's definitely a really good option. But if you don't need her, then you can save your orbs for the Astra Mythic unit that's probably going to be appearing in a couple of months. And Astra is definitely a season where we need a lot more utility based units, and I hope that the Astra Mythic we get is at least much better than Naga, which I know a lot of people are eagerly waiting for. I really want to thank my YouTube members for their support, and if you enjoyed this video, then please be sure to leave a like and a comment. Helps me tremendously, and share this video with your friends who are summoning on this banner and who are really excited to have Mila as a mythic unit. Be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell, because YouTube sub boxes are about as functional as all of the dancers after they see the defense stat of Mila. So with that being said, I'll see you guys next time. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.